So welcome everyone, my name is Kim Callaway, I'm the Director and Founder of Children's Safety Australia, and joined with me for our very first podcast today is Professor Kerryann Walsh from the Queensland University of Technology. Kerryann, you are a Professor in the Faculty of Education at the Queensland University of Technology. You conduct research in the interdisciplinary field of child maltreatment prevention and have researched and published in the areas of online safety, school-based child sexual abuse prevention programs, child protection policy, professionals reporting of child abuse and neglect, and training interventions for mandatory reporters. You've also served as an academic advisor to the Royal Commission, Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse, and have led research underpinning the National Principles for Child Safe Organisations. And you come today as well as a friend of and a member of the Advisory Board of Children's Safety Australia.
Yeah.
So, bearing in mind all of the research you've conducted, what would you consider to be the most groundbreaking and why?
That's a really good question, actually, Kim. And at first, I'd like to say that research sometimes looks like it's a solo sport, but it's actually a team sport. So everything that I've done has been in teams. So the kinds of things that were groundbreaking were in a time and place. So the first research that I did with colleagues from the Faculty of Law was about mandatory reporting. And that was in the mid-2000s, and it was a big thing back then. It hasn't really stopped being a big thing, but the kinds of information that we were uncovering about inconsistencies in the laws and so on was kind of groundbreaking at the time. And then moving through, to the 2010s, when my team started to look at sexual abuse prevention programs in schools, for example, that was a big topic then. So, and I think our work broke new ground by helping people understand, the whole spectrum of programs that were out there. And then most recently, we've moved to doing some work in the online safety space, which is really, current at the moment, especially after last year and lockdowns and homeschooling and so on. So the research has had a time and a place, and yet the research has also been enduring because we can never stop remembering and doing stuff about mandatory reporting as well as all the other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic answer. And I love that there's been so many periods of it being groundbreaking. And like you say, it's a time and place thing, working with different people. And yeah, it's amazing. You are in the midst of leaving an amazing legacy.
Yeah, my teams. Yeah, we hope so. We want to have our work to have practical benefit.
Yeah. So who would you say are the major players in child sexual abuse prevention, and how do they need to work together?
Interpret that question in different ways. So if we were talking about who the main researchers are, you can just Google and find out who we are, and we all talk with each other across the globe. We're not a huge community, and we're not part of an organised community, but we do correspond with each other and prop each other up and give each other encouragement, that's for sure. Another way of interpreting your question about who the key players are to think about all the different people who are around children. So thinking ecologically, you've got the child, you've got the family around the child, you've got the services that the family interact with, and then you've got kind of broader governmental and societal systems. So at every part of that ecosystem, there are things that can be done to prevent child sexual abuse. So without making children responsible for preventing their own abuse, we can teach children a lot of things to raise their awareness about identifying and avoiding unsafe situations. We can also support the parents and the siblings and the families around the children to have a prevention mindset. And then around the family, there's the schools, there's health facilities, there's the courts, there's justice system, there's any range of services that families can interact with, and they need to be conscious of children's safety and how they can prevent and identify abuse in their own context. And then we have governmental, policies and laws and so on that surround that child. So that tends to be the way I think about preventing child sexual abuse and what all the players, multiple players. So in the end, it's kind of that phrase, preventing child sexual abuse is everybody's business.
Yeah.
It's part of everything that we do. And services like Children's Safety Australia fit into that ecosystem because you're a service that surrounds the child. You might have direct contact with children, you might have direct contact with parents, but you're part of that ecosystem that sits around the child and the family.
That responsibility of all of those players. And I guess where someone slips there, if everyone is taking it as a responsibility, we can help to pick each other up and encourage. And I also loved your comment about the academic community in this space, that you are, very encouraging of each other.
Yeah, there's space for everybody. Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah. And I think
we need more.
Yeah, given such a confronting topic, having that support from peers must be, particularly helpful.
Yeah, terrific.
You've researched the role of mandatory reporters in reporting child abuse and neglect. How well do you think mandatory reporters are doing in actually performing their important role?
I don't think we will ever arrive at a point where we have all mandatory reporters trained and, developed professionally to the extent where everyone in the teaching community or everyone in the, every medical practitioner is fully trained and really totally knowledgeable. So I think we have to keep chipping away at that. I think the extent to which mandatory reporters, the efficacy or how well they do their job is in some ways related to the professional development they receive and also the amount of time that they've been mandatory reporters for. So, for example, in early childhood education and care in Queensland and in Victoria, those educators have only been mandatory reporters for a few years. So, they're still coming to terms with that, the double-edged sword about knowing families, but also understanding things from the child's perspective. And one researcher called this dancing on the edge, not, being able to understand things from a parent's perspective and the child's perspective. So these things are complex. I think we can always do better, but I think the efficacy or how good mandatory reporters are at doing their job relates to the quality of their professional development and education. And that begins in pre-service, like back when they're doing their education and training at uni or, in TAFE or in other training organisations.
You're just making me think of an organisational culture which probably reflects the quality of the professional development in the first place, but also then the role modelling of actually taking that responsibility, very seriously and doing their utmost to perform the best role they can in protection of children. I would imagine as a new person in a field, whether it's medical profession or education, I'd be looking to my peers. What are they doing and sort of following their lead?
Yeah, it's kind of a collective effort in workplaces. We have this concept of collective self-efficacy, and one of my PhD students, Natasha Ailing, is investigating this right now, is looking at how together a staff can feel effective and feel confident that they can report, identify and report abuse appropriately, in their organisation. So I think it is part of an organisational culture, and it's related to, strongly related to that training and support.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So also in relation to child sexual abuse, what part do you think schools can play in that space in preventing child sexual abuse?
We have the National Principles for Child Safe Organisations, so I think that is like the foundation stone now of how. That's our guidebook for, at a high level and at a foundation level. So it's how we can prevent child sexual abuse. So they're things like, organisational culture and leadership, governance, policies being in place, complaints processes being available, parents and children feeling like they can notify and disclose when things are when they have something to tell, important to tell teachers and schools. So that's kind of the foundation. Part of that is also one of those principles is about children being able to be educated about child sexual abuse and having access to high quality programs that can help them obtain knowledge and understand the concepts that are related to keeping themselves safe. Schools play a huge role with that knowledge that children develop through the years. It's got to be developed, children can't just receive that information once and they're inoculated like a vaccine. They have to get it over and over again, and it needs to be repeated over time. So yeah, schools play a huge role. I think they're the core institution really where that has the potential to reach every child, like universal prevention.
Based on your changing a little bit of topic to online safety, based on your work in this area, what would be your 3 top tips you would provide to parents and carers in trying to keep their children safe online?
Yeah, I don't know how to just keep it to 3.
Oh, okay, go crazy.
But I have kind of crystallised 3. I think as parents, we need to remember that children actually have a right to access information online. So moves to ban things, completely ban things or rule them out or are not going to work and are not okay. It means that children's rights are being violated in some ways if that happens. By the same token, we need to introduce technology to kids at an age when it's appropriate for them to be using it independently and using it in supervised ways. So, there's a whole lot of information out there available to parents about developing, online or device contracts and things like that, family contracts and family rules and rules of engagement around use of the internet and supervision and so on. So I think that would be my first point, that we have to realise that being online for children has benefits and pitfalls, the same as it does for parents. The second would be that start the chat, which is one of the kind of bylines from this year's World Internet Safety Day. So start the chat. So it's never too early to start the chat. So chat often and chat early about online safety is, I think, one of the keys. So even before children independently use an iPhone or independently use a computer, safety can be part of the way that parents talk about technology by articulating some of the things that they do online to keep themselves safe, and just making those thoughts hearable and visible to the children. So some of that kind of stuff, you're on your iPhone, I better not do that might not be safe, just articulating some of those things in ways that children can understand, and children will prick up their ears because they're always listening to what their parents do. So start the chat early. As children get older, then sometimes the chat needs to include some direct questioning about the kinds of things they're seeing online. And that idea about what if scenarios. So what if this, and the car is a really good place for this. So, what if this, what if that? And, together with the child, you can start solving problems together and get access to how they're thinking about what they would do if they encountered different kinds of things online, including bullying things, because that is one of the things that we know kids worry about the most and experience the most. So be mindful of children's rights, start the chat, and the third thing would be know where you can reach out for help. So if something does happen with your child, something is posted as they get older, they do something that they later regret, that exactly where you can go and get help.
Parents often think that strangers present the greatest risk to their child in terms of personal safety. What would you say to those parents?
Yes, well, stranger danger might have been a message they received themselves when they were at school, or they might have read about it, and they legitimately might be frightened about that, people lurking around and so on. We know from multiple inquiries into child sexual abuse that the greatest risk to kids is from people that they know and trust. So it's a very difficult concept for parents to get their heads around, and it needs to be introduced quite gently, I think, to parents, to have them sit with that concept and think it through. We know from the literature and research that, kids who have step parents, for example, are at greater risk of child sexual abuse. Yet, at the same time, that doesn't mean that every step parent is going to abuse a child. So I think that understanding the difference between a higher risk and, immediately jumping to the thought that, well, everybody does that. It's a bit the Royal Commission revealed to Australia that people in religious order of varying types could hurt children quite badly and could actually be quite callous individuals with multiple victims and so on. That doesn't mean that every person serving as a clergy or in a religious order is going to sexually abuse children or as a paedophile. So there's just those slight differences that we need to understand. I think the same applies to strangers. So yes, there is a risk to children of strangers, but it is minuscule compared to the risk that children will face from people that they know and trust. Their families, their siblings, unfortunately, their teachers, the coaches, the clergy, the dance instructor, the yoga teacher. There are so many people around the child. So I think one of the keys when we're talking to parents about these really difficult issues is to provide them with tools for how they can, broad principles that they can use when they're kind of vetting people that their child comes in contact with, and giving parents permission to ask of those adults a series of basic kinds of questions that they might devise. And there's different, some of the child safety books for parents, like the one that Frida Briggs wrote about safe children. There's another one that...
Smart Parenting for Safer Children.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. Safe Parenting for Smarter Children. There's another one that was written by Sandy Wertelli and Feather Burkhauer, I think. And they have some really nice principles in there that they suggest, you could put them up on your fridge at home where, there's just 5 or 6 little questions that parents can ask of people who come in contact with their kids. There's lots of strategies out there, but often parents just don't know where to find them. Yeah. But we need to give parents time and space and tools to be able to think through what that actually means, that kids might be at risk from people that they know and trust.
Couldn't agree with you more with your initial comment that idea of people that my child knows and trusts, people I know and trust as a parent, could be the risk to my child. To actually be able to absorb that thought and work out what does that mean to me, and just putting this, I guess, realisation into their mind is a very confronting thing, I would imagine, for many parents who haven't entertained that thought previously. It's much easier for people to have their head in the sand and think it's the people I don't know, it's the people it'll happen to someone else, and
it's a safer thought, and we always want to jump to the safer thought.
But I love the idea of those practical questions that you were talking about to prompt parents. So just getting them from the awareness to how we can practically apply, how we can, without being paranoid about people in our lives, be really proactive and advocating for our children.
And I think parents worry that they'll offend somebody by asking those questions. In some ways, one thing I've spoken to parents about is by having the courage to ask those questions, you can actually be creating a safer world for children apart from just your own children, because you're creating a culture and a kind of standard that you're putting out there that you believe, that you think children deserve, that we parents and that we adults ask these questions of each other.
Absolutely.
So if somebody is offended, that's their burden to wear, and maybe not yours as a parent, because your key role is in keeping your child safe. Yeah.
And I think an excellent role modelling opportunity for the parent or for the teacher or whoever it is who is being asked these questions, to know that they can ask the same questions advocating for their own children.
Absolutely.
So fantastic. Yeah, if you're offended, absolutely, it's not your, you know that you're doing the right thing by your child, and at the end of the day, that trumps, social acceptance and keeping everybody happy.
Keeping everyone happy and doing what you think might be the right thing. Yeah.
One piece of advice you'd give to parents and carers to help keep their children safe?
I think it's know where to go to get help.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, we can, the internet is the best resource for parents. Yeah. And there is actually information out there about how to keep your children safe. You just have to know where to look for it. Yeah. So I think your podcasts are going to be a good place for parents to Google. They need to know some key terms to be Googling so that they can find the right information. Another great source of information, and parents might have accessed this site, it's at the Australian government website called Raising Children Network. So parents it has a wealth of information for parents about all aspects to do with parenting, beginning with, in the antenatal period, through breastfeeding, through, what do you do when your child is having trouble sleeping, making friends, all of these little things that come up. They're not little, big things that come up when you're parenting. So just like all of those things, the Raising Children Network also has a bunch of pages about preventing child sexual abuse and how to keep your children safe.
Excellent.
It's also got really great information about bullying prevention and about older kids, like what to do when your children begin to go into that phase where they're, questioning their sexuality, experimenting with things. They might begin to do some sexting and things like that. Like, what do you do as a parent, and how do you lead your child into doing that, safely, if that's what your family culture would like, or how you kind of deter them and manage that as a parent more broadly. So Raising Children Network is great, but I think Children's Safety Australia are going to have a big contribution to make in that space too.
Oh, thank you, Kerryann. But I look forward to looking at the Raising Children Network. I think that's a great resource for our parents and carers who are tuning in. A couple of questions about you personally. So I guess less focused on advice. What advice would 12-year-old Kerryann Walsh give to herself?
Yeah, it's when you gave me that question, I thought, I really need to prepare for this. 12-year-old Kerryann isn't really that much different, deep down than I am now. Always been a very practical person and very down to earth. And I feel like I can talk to just about anybody. One of the things she might say to her, she'd probably say, back yourself. Because I think there have been times where I've, lacked confidence to speak up about certain things. And I've grown in confidence in that over the years. But I think 12-year-old Kerryann might say, back yourself.
I think 12-year-old Kerryann's advice to Kerryann is excellent for everyone. I think that's brilliant. Yeah, very good advice. This is the last question I have for you. What is one thing about you that not many people know and that you're willing to disclose?
I'm a clean freak. I like to be very organised, very clean, and to have surfaces. For example, just recently we had our computers here at work rolled out, and I had a new computer installed, and there were cords everywhere, and I was so distracted for about a day and a half till I sorted out how I was going to manage all these cords. But I'm a clean
workspace, clean mind.
Yes,
get on with things.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I can imagine you would relate to Monica from Friends. Are you a Friends fan at all?
No, I'm not, but I did read Marie Kondo.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah, very good. And can I attest, when we came into this room today, Kerryann was busy cleaning the tables. So yes, I have witnessed the clean freakishness. Yeah, brilliant. Kerryann, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. It was lovely to talk with you.